So today we're going to continue our look at Much Ado About Nothing and the use of language. So the last video we did, the last thing we talked about was repetition. So following on from repetition, we have lists. So Shakespeare would compiles through the play lists of words and phrases, and these lists increase in intensity, varying the description and the atmosphere of whatever he is, the reason for that list to be created. So if you consider, let's think about Act 2, Scene 3, roundabout lines 126 to 128. This is Claudio speaking, and it's Claudio's doing an over-the-top description of Beatrice's love-stricken supposed grief. And he says, "Then down upon her knees she falls, weeps, sobs, beats her heart, tears her hair, prays, curses. Oh, sweet Benedict, God give me patience." Other lists are brief descriptions, like Hero's listing of the many kinds of men Beatrix could spell backwards. So you see that there's lots of different lists scattered throughout the play. Benedict is a great one for lists. When he goes off on one of these big kind of linguistic speeches, he'll often have lots of lists. Next thing we're going to look at is Malpropisms. So, this is something that we see in Dogberry. And Malpropism is mistakenly using one word for another similar word. Now the term actually is derived from an 18th century play where there was a character called Mrs. Malpro who used similar sounding words. For example, he'd say, "He is a very pineapple of politeness," or as headstrong as an allegory on the banks of the Nile. Now, what's interesting about Dogberry's use of Malpropisms is Dogberry confuses similar sounding words antithetically. Can't say that word. Antithetically. So, antithesis is putting two things that have opposite meanings beside each other, so therefore the word has the opposite meaning. For example, that a deserving man becomes a desertless man. A sensible, fit man becomes a senseless and fit man. So you get the idea. Now the reason that Shakespeare does this is his antithetical Malpropisms that would be a very good phrase to use in an essay. Illustrate the play's concern with distinguishing reality from appearance. Now the difference is, so others in the play deliberately use language to deceive. Dogberry does so unwittingly. By reversing language. Now, a really big area to discuss and to look at with Much Ado About Nothing and language is Shakespeare's use of verse and prose. So, Shakespeare is famous for writing in blank verse, and Shakespeare's blank verse is written in the form of iambic pentameter. Now, in Shakespeare, verse is spoken by high status characters, and is also spoken at times of seriousness or romantic scenes. So obviously a famous example of verse being used in a romantic scene would be in Romeo and Juliet. Prose would be used more for comedy and low status characters. An example of that would be Dogberry. He only speaks in prose. Now, interestingly, Much Ado, 2/3 to 3/4, somewhere between that, of the play is in prose. Shakespeare uses verse in serious moments in the play. Benedict and Beatrice speak mostly in prose, and the prose lends itself to comedy as it depends, so especially the comedy of Benedict and Beatrice. Their comedy is sophisticated, it's not like Dogberry's comedy. But Benedict and Beatrice's comedy is highly sophisticated, but it's in prose as it depends on the seemingly quick and spontaneous dialogue that they have between themselves. However, Shakespeare's prose contains many of the linguistic features of verse, namely imagery, rhythm, repetition, antithesis, and the lists. We see high status characters like Leonardo, Don Pedro, Benedict, Beatrice. Their prose is elegant. They use elegant prose, not like Dogberry's prose. So you see, and we see when the scene is relaxed, we've got prose. When the scene is serious or romantic, we have verse. It's important to realise that Shakespeare switches from prose to verse as part of the dramatic construction of the scenes. Now we're going to consider the galling scenes. Now, if you look at them in the play, they're very different. There's a lot of similarities, but in the way that Shakespeare constructs them, they're very different. So Benedict and Beatrice. It's almost all in prose. When Benedict, the galling scene of Benedict, it's almost all in prose, and that's because it's played humorously. Beatrice, she speaks more. The galling scene for Beatrice is mostly verse. Now, what's interesting up to this point, Beatrice has only spoken prose. Then after the eavesdropping, the soliloquy that she speaks is in verse. And it's beautiful verses, alternating, rhyming lines of iambic. Let me spell iambic. Pentameter. And this is because the galling scene of Beatrice has more feeling. Now, what's interesting here, Shakespeare's using language to highlight gender differences. We also see this in Hero. Hero speaks mostly in verse. And so that shows that her character, this makes her character more elegant and have more feeling. So we see also with Hero, we're going to look at the different relationships. Hero and Claudio so if we compare them with Benedict and Beatrice, during their courtships, Hero and Claudio's courtship is conducted mostly in verse, whereas Benedict and Beatrice are mostly in prose. And Shakespeare does this to really draw attention to the formal and artificial nature of their courtship. And when you contrast it to the prose of Benedict and Beatrice, which is their courtship is earthy and real, it has that sense of realism about it. The use of prose the use of prose also highlights their worldly outlook on life. They do slip into verse at dramatically intense moments. When overcome by emotion of hearing Benedict's love, Beatrice speaks in prose in the soliloquy which we have just discussed. Now, we're going to look at a wee bit more about how Shakespeare uses in changes between prose to verse in the denouncement scene. So that starts off all very pleasantly in prose. Then Claudio's actual denouncement of Hero is in verse, and it continues in verse. The dialogue continues in verse for over 200 lines, back and forth between the characters, and it doesn't go back to prose until it switches back to prose when Benedict and Beatrice are alone again. So you see that as the tension rises at the serious moment, Shakespeare uses the verse, and then as the tension is taken away from the scene, we come back to prose. Finally, we're going to look at songs. So in the play, we have different songs. We actually have 3 songs, to be precise. The first song is sung by Balthazar just before the galling of Benedict, or well, technically during the galling of Benedict. Now, the first and last songs are really an apology for male inconsistency. So this is Act 2, Scene 2. Sigh No More Ladies is quite ironic in that the men are so scared of being cuckolded, and yet the song that Balthazar sings is all about the man being inconsistent to the woman. And this occurs at a turning point of the play. And when we consider the structure of the play, Sigh No More and the final song are both at major points in the play. So these are important structural signposts as well within the play. The song echoes the central theme of the play, that of deception and the fraud of men. The antithetical refrain at the end of the song is blithe and bonny and sounds of woe. And what these do, they imply that they highlight to us the light and dark elements of the play. Now, we hear from Benedict his comments on the song. It has an implication. The song that Balthazar sings is maybe not well sung, but the words are beautiful. So we have this, within the presentation of this song, we have the beautiful words, but badly sung. So this highlights the dissonance between language and reality, which we see throughout the whole play. Now, the second song is the song of Benedict, the god of love. And it's in Act 5, Scene 2. And this is a scene where Benedict is trying to be the conventional lover. This song is actually a well-known song from Shakespeare's day. It's not one of Shakespeare's songs. This would have been just a common song at the time, and it's quite comic. The way it's presented is comic. We have this idea that Benedict is trying to write a song to Beatrice and he can't. He says at the end that he's not been born under a rhyming planet, and the fact that this is a bad song and Benedict is singing it, he's trying to write it, is a highlight to us that Benedict is not a conventional lover who sits and writes sonnets to the woman that he loves. He can't do it. And then the final song is Pardon, Goddess of the Night. And that's sung by Dom Pedro in Act 5, Scene 3 at Heroes tomb, and it's the ironic fulfillment of Don Pedro's vow to sing at Hero's tomb. The song itself, over the years, has failed to impress critics. And perhaps this is because Don Pedro and Claudio, for all their talk of being, for all their gallantry, or supposed gallantry, they are bad poets. So Benedict is a bad poet, and he admits it, because he's not the conventional lover, but Claudio and Don Pedro think themselves to be gallants, but fail. We see through their character that they're not who they say they say they or present themselves to be, and we see this in the fact that they're bad poets. They're not got that romantic ability to produce the sonnet of a conventional lover. Benedict owns the fact that he can't, because that is just not him. So those are the 3 songs in Much Ado About Nothing, and that ends our videos on the language in the play.